Ooh, hi, everybody. Okay. So welcome, everybody. We've got about 2 more minutes. We'll just hold off until the top of the hour and we'll get started because we have so much to talk about. Oh my goodness, so many questions. So what I'd like you all to do, go ahead and hop over to the chat. Tell me where you're joining from, and feel free to put a question in there. I have questions from the questionnaire that I'm going to get to first, but if we have time at the end, I'm happy to answer any additional questions you have or any responses that you have to some of the answers that I'm giving, if you want to pop in with that. So go ahead, let me know where you're calling from. If you have a question, do me a favor, put like a Q in front of it, and that way I can spot the questions real quick and I can get to those. So hey, Brenda, nice to see you. And Roberta. Oh, how to treat ears. So if that, okay, so that gives me a chance to say something I was going to start talking about anyway right away. Let me just fucking get everybody joining us. Some of you asked questions about medication and supplements and nutrition, and those kinds of things that kind of fall into the medical category. And that's a little bit outside of the scope of what I'm prepared to talk about. Because first of all, I'm not a veterinarian. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a dog groomer, although, I groom my own dogs. But, one of the things that I do talk about a lot in my programs with my clients is consent-based interactions with the dogs, as far as grooming, cleaning ears, brushing teeth, that kind of thing. But those things take time. So, so that's one of the things that I wanted to mention right at the beginning, that if it's a medical question, there are lots of places you can go to get those answers. And in fact, I do have a friend who's a veterinarian who's come on and done live streams and interviews with me in the past. So I may reach out to her and find out if she's willing to go ahead and do that again. And she would certainly be able to, within limits, because of course, she's not treating any of your dogs, so she can't give specific medical advice, but she can, tell you things that I would not be able to tell you. So, okay, so that's one thing. I see a bunch of questions. I'm going to get to those. Let me just let the folks in who are waiting in the waiting room. Okay. So one of the questions that came up, this is a very specific question. And if I were to answer all the specific questions where people really described in detail stuff that's going on with you in your life, with your dogs, issues you're facing that have to do with, events and that kind of thing. That's a little too specific for this. I want to keep this a little more general because we only have an hour. But at the end of this today, I will give you some information about how, if you want, you can reach out and have a one-to-one chat with me, and I might be able to, address some of your things personally, but I can't do it for here. So, okay. So there is one, and not if you're not muted, please do. Let me go in here. Let's see. Yes. Okay.
I have a very reactive dog that is attacking my other dog out of the blue.
Okay. Well, we can certainly address those kinds of things coming up. Absolutely. But for right now, let's see. Go to that. And I'd like you all to just stay muted for a while, just in case there's background noise, because sometimes that gets a little distracting. But I'm going to give you an opportunity to, chime in and ask questions. And I know that most of you here are dealing with some kind of a concern that has to do with reactive behavior, and that's a pretty big category. And everybody's issues are very personal and very specific, but there are some overall things that we can talk about. So before we get started, here are the things that I'm not going to address today, only because they are not within my special expertise. And there are people who are experts in these areas that you can reach out to. And a lot of them have been speakers at the summit. So if you have that information, and you've got the replay coming up this weekend, so you can always jump in and get any information that you missed. But medication and nutrition, which I already mentioned, also separation anxiety. That's a very complex issue, and it's a specialized area. And there are folks who are trained specifically to work with separation anxiety. But having said that, what you think or what you describe as separation anxiety, because you're looking at your dog's behavior, and this happens with a lot of folks. You look at it and you say, "Oh, that looks like separation anxiety," so you kind of assume that that's what it is, but it's not that at all. It's something completely different. So that's one of the things that that we want to clarify before you went. And somebody who's a specialist in separation anxiety would be able to work that out with you. If you have a concern where your safety, someone else's safety, or your dog's safety is at risk, in other words, the dog is biting or has threatened to bite or has a bite history, and you're worried that the dog is going to bite you, you need to contact a professional right away. That's not something that I can just give you casual advice about, okay? Because that's really important. That's kind of on the level of an emergency. So you need to get specialized help, and just make sure that if you reach out to a professional for help, that when you talk to that person, you have a good feeling about what they're telling you. I know I've said this over and over again. If you're talking to a professional and what they're telling you gives you kind of an uneasy feeling in the pit of your stomach, or in your chest feels tight, or it just makes you feel tense, that is a big red flag. Your intuition, your body is telling you, whoa, stop. Don't go any farther with this particular individual. So stop and continue searching until you find someone who makes you feel positive. It makes you feel good about what's going on. It doesn't make you worried that that person is going to hurt your animal. So, okay. Let me just address one thing, and I have to do this because someone asked this. It's one of my favorite topics, and it's one thing that really gets me aggravated. And here it is. The person asked, how do you stop someone who insists on petting your dog, but your dog is scared or nervous or doesn't want that stranger to touch him? The dog is backing away and the person insists. Raise your hands or wave at me if that's ever happened to you. That somebody has, yeah. Yeah, people have said, "Oh, I love dogs. Dogs love me. Let me pet your dog." And you're saying, "Yeah, but my dog is acting a little nervous." "Oh, that's okay. I don't mind." Yeah, but the dog does. So, quick and easy answer for that. Um, if the person asks, or even if the person doesn't ask, you simply say, "Wait a minute, let me ask the dog if it's okay." And if you can tell your dog doesn't want that, you say, "Sorry, the dog says no." And then you go on your way. Because if you engage in a conversation and start to give all these reasons why the person should not pet your dog, that is not going to go anywhere. You know that, right? And we're trying to be so nice. You're trying to be so courteous and so polite. You don't want to be rude. But on the other hand, your dog is really upset. And so you got to decide what's your priority. Of course, your priority is going to be your dog, right? Not a stranger who says, "Oh, I want to pet your dog." So you will just have to say, "Wait a minute." If they don't ask, you can just say, "Oh, wait a minute. I need to ask the dog." And then you look at the dog and say, "Oh, the dog, no, the dog says no. So sorry." So it's not you saying no, it's the dog. Okay. So that's the question. And I see tons of questions in here, and I promise you that I will get to them in a minute. But and in my the general questions that I've kind of summarized, if a lot of things came up in the same general category, I've kind of summarized them into an overall question. So some of the things you're asking might fall into this category. So let's go. I've got 3 questions. I'm just going to quickly show you 3 PowerPoint slides with the questions on them, and then we'll go back to the, speaker thing. I'm not going to make you look at slides the whole time. So let me just show you what those 3 questions are. And hopefully you should be able to see that slide. So we have three questions. First one, what can I do when my dog is out of control? All right, so a lot of the questions came under that general category. And the dog is triggered by different things. Maybe the dog is in the house and triggered by somebody walking past and the dog looks out the window. Maybe the dog is triggered when you're walking the dog on a leash and sees another dog, or sees an animal, or sees a cat, or sees, a tall man wearing a hat. It could be anything. But the question is, people want to know, when the dog is out of control, what can I do? So that's the first one. Second question, how do I help my dog feel safe when the environment appears threatening? And we know that if the dog doesn't feel safe, then nothing else you do is really going to matter, because the dog is going to be so preoccupied with either finding safety, we call it fight, flight, or freeze. The dog is going to be so, his brain is going to be completely taken over with the need to, let me just hang on one second. I've got people in the waiting room. I'm not paying attention. Admit everybody. Okay. All right. There we go. I've got to pay more attention so I don't leave people hanging out in the waiting room. So the second question we'll get to is this one. How do I help my dog feel safe? Safety is very important. And no matter what it is that the dog perceives as threatening, what you think about it, of course, isn't relevant, because it's how the dog perceives it that really matters. And then the third overall question was, what can I do next when I tried everything and I'm out of options? So you tried food treats when the dog is stressed and that doesn't work. You went to classes and the dog appeared to be learning things in the class, but it didn't carry over into everyday life. Counter conditioning, and Steffi Guy, if you haven't listened to Steffi's interview, you're going to have a chance to listen again over the weekend. Listen to Steffi. She has a lot of information about counter conditioning. It is not the perfect solution that we tend to think it is. Sometimes it really does more damage than it does good. So that's an important thing to be aware of. Exposures, exposure, gradual exposure is a process that we help in, that we use to help dogs self-regulate. We use it for people also. But if it's not done systematically and carefully, that can cause problems also. And we tend to think, more training, that's the answer. Just do more training, and sometimes that doesn't really help. So those are the 3 questions that I'm going to get to. And let me get started with the first one. A lot of people ask this in different ways, is when my dog is out of control, maybe it's leash reactivity, maybe it's overexcited greeting behavior. You come home after you've been out for a while and the dog is all excited, or greeting family members when they come back. The dog just seems out of control, racing around, jumping, barking, jumping on people, and it gets it gets irritating to some people in the family. So the question is, what can you do when the dog is out of control? And the key word that I want to stress there is the word when. Because if you wait until the dog is actually out of control, you've already missed your opportunity to do anything about it. And the reason is, and I know you've probably heard me say this before, but the reason is that the dog is over threshold. And by threshold, we mean that emotional line, that imaginary line that is the difference between a dog being self-regulated and under control and being able to use his thinking, learning, problem-solving brain. And being over threshold means his thinking, problem-solving brain has gone offline because now he's in his super excited over threshold. We call it fight, flight, or freeze. And we tend to think it has to do with fear. And so we assume that the excited greeter, the dog that's, gets over the top excited when you come home and racing around and jumping on you, we think the dog is happy. If the dog were happy, he wouldn't be over happy in the sense of being content. I don't mean your dog doesn't have a happy life. I mean, in that particular moment, if he were content and self-regulated, he wouldn't be doing all of that extreme excessive behavior. So what that tells us is that dog is also not getting his needs met. And when a dog does not get his needs met, he is going to try even harder. So what do we do in that situation? At that point, it's too late to appeal to the dog's learning brain, because that learning brain is offline for that. And that's a survival mechanism. It happens to people also, so it happens to the dog. It's the way the nervous system works. It's a survival thing with mammals. So what's the answer then? If you can't tell the dog what to do instead, and what we tend to do is start giving the dog directions, instructions, like come here, sit, lie down, stop it. But when we just give instructions and we think the dog isn't listening, well, the dog isn't listening because the dog can't. The dog cannot process that information because the part of his brain that he would need to use to process that is not functioning at the moment. So what do you do? The answer is that the reason the dog is over threshold at that moment is that there has not been sufficient preparation when the dog is in a calm state of mind so that he understands how to regulate his own emotions. So anyway, I don't know if you can see the shirt that I'm wearing. It says, if you change the emotions, you change the behavior. So what we need to do, instead of trying to change the behavior that's being driven by these emotions and trying to put the brakes on that emotion when it's already over the top, we need to work on emotions when the dog is able to process them with his learning brain. And that takes time. That's not a quick fix. That's not, oh, there's some little secret thing that you can teach your dog to do, and all of a sudden it's going to cure all that. That kind of thing doesn't exist, as far as I know. And I'm pretty sure it doesn't. So what happens, and again, I did a wonderful live stream with Karen Paneer a couple of days ago. And if you haven't watched it, it's on Facebook. You can go ahead and watch it anytime you want. It's in the Facebook group. She spoke very eloquently, very beautifully about the importance of preparing dogs for those emotional moments. And Andy Hale says the same thing. When a dog is in a situation that they don't yet have the tools, the emotional tools to cope with, they're not going to be able to cope. And they're going to go over threshold because they don't know what else to do. They don't have the tools to handle it. So the answer to that question is preparation ahead of time. And you might, well, how do I do that? That is a process. It's one of the things that I teach in my programs, and I know a lot of the other people that you heard speak during the summit teach in their programs. So that information is available to you. It is a step-by-step process. It takes time. That's why my program right now, my program is going to a year, because I have found that 6 months, 8 months is not enough time for a lot of people. And I just can't justify working with someone as a paid client for 6 months or 8 months and then leaving them with the job still unfinished. So, so that's it. You can expect that the work is going to take time. Will it take you a year? I don't know. It depends on your dog and on your situation and on the dog's inner emotional state. How much work do you have to do? So you do the work you have to do. It takes how long it takes. And the progress is something that is a wonderful thing to see. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's better than struggling. So I'll leave you with that. If you have any other questions about that topic, I'm going to go to the next question of my prepared questions in a second here. So the second question was, how do I help my dog feel safe when the environment appears threatening? Okay, awesome question. That is also part of the process. So one of the things that we do when dogs don't feel safe is we wait a little bit too long to jump in and support them. We wait until we don't, and the reason that's not intentional. We do it because we haven't trained our observation skills to notice the early signs that the dog is starting to get anxious. And even if you do recognize the early signs, there's something in us, and I know this from talking to people, and this is not a judgment because we all do this. We see the signs and we think to ourselves, oh no, the dog is going to get excited. I know what's going to happen. You start to feel anxious and tense yourself, and you start to freeze up, and you don't act in time. And maybe part of your brain is saying, oh, I hope it doesn't happen this time. I hope. And you're hoping that the dog will be okay. But you also know that it's probably going to go the way it's gone every other time. So number one, we wait too long. The second thing is that we let our own anxiety spill over onto the dog. So the dog starts to feed on our own anxiousness. So this takes a certain amount of self-control on our part. We have to keep ourselves mentally and physically grounded. We can't let ourselves mirror the dog's anxiety, because the dog's going to reflect that right back to you, and it's just going to escalate. So I have, maybe some of you've probably seen this, maybe you've downloaded the PDF that I have. It's a 6-step process. It's, all the steps start with A. And instead of instructing the dog and saying, or trying to bribe the dog with food, which never works. Don't try to calm a nervous dog down by giving him food. It's just not going to work. So what we do is we let our anxieties spill over. We start to tell the dog, come here, sit, watch me, stay close to me, and so on. We start to say things trying to prevent the inevitable. So instead, my system is you start by simply acknowledging the dog's feeling. So for example, and this is something you have to practice when the dog is calm. You can't wait until you're in this, hyper aroused situation and expect this to work. You've got to, it goes back to the preparation again. Anything to do with reactivity in your dogs has to do with being prepared. And the preparation has to take place at times when both you and the dog are calm and focused and relaxed. You can't wait until you're super stressed and the dog is highly aroused to try to teach this stuff. It's just the wrong time. So the first thing you do is simply acknowledge to the dog. Maybe you're at home and the dog is barking at something out the window, but you can see the dog isn't really hyper excited, just like, oh, woof, woof, what's that out there? You say, yeah, I see that you're excited. So you acknowledge, and then you validate it. You appreciate the fact that the dog is feeling the way the dog is feeling. You're not telling the dog, stop barking, or don't worry, or it's nothing, or you're okay, because the dog doesn't feel okay. So if you were upset and nervous and scared and somebody said to you, oh, you're okay, you'd say, no, I'm not. So you validate the dog's feelings. You say, yeah, I see that I see that you're excited about that. I know that bothers you, doesn't it? I can see that bothers you. And then you accommodate what the dog needs. So you invite the dog to either move away from it, because distance is your friend. The farther away you are from that stimulating event, the easier it is for the dog to cope with it. So you want to move the dog farther away, not by force, but by invitation, because the next A is you're going to ask the dog, what would you like to do? So you're going to ask, would you like to come over here with me? Not luring, not bribing with food, but inviting. If the dog says, no, I have to keep barking, then you just go back to step one. You say, okay, I see that you're still upset about that. And you talk the dog through it, kind of like you would do with an anxious or upset person. If you were the calm one, you would talk them through it. You would listen. You would validate. You would let that person feel heard. Because what that dog wants is pretty much what, any of us would want. If we were upset and telling someone about it, We'd want to feel that they heard us. Yes, I hear you. I get it. I understand. And so you narrate the situation for the dog, you talk them through it, you validate their feelings, and you invite them to do something else. And it's not a force. You're not instructing them, go lie down on your mat, for example, which is what a lot of training practices would do. Go lie down on your mat. So, so that's not, that's not helpful to start to give the dog directions, because we don't know how his learning brain is functioning. Is it starting to go offline, or is the dog more focused on being worried? We don't know that. So we have to validate the emotions. We accept the dog in front of us right now. That we accept the feelings that that dog has at the moment. It doesn't mean that you accept those as a permanent state, as a permanent emotional state for that dog. No, we don't want that dog to be distressed for the rest of his life. We want him to feel better, but right now, that's how he feels. So how do you help a dog feel safe? Preparation, again, preparation in calm times, so that you can take that process that you've taught the dog when he's relaxed and he's able to learn it. You can take that process and transfer it into a more stressful time. And no matter how much preparation you do, if a dog is already over threshold, highly aroused, in fight, flight, or freeze nervous system state, then it's too late to use that process. You need to get the dog out of the situation any way you can. You just need to get the dog out of there. So, okay, my next one, I want to make sure I leave time for your questions. So I'm going to go, I'm going to jump over now to the third question is, what can I do next when I've tried everything and I'm out of options? So you tried food and classes, you tried counter conditioning, you tried exposing. One of the questions that you all asked was, should I just keep putting my dog into the situation that gets him all excited until he just gets used to it? And the answer to that is absolutely not. No. Why? Because you are increasing that dog's stress. And you are moving the dog to the point where he crosses over into shutdown. And a shutdown dog may appear to be compliant because he becomes very still. But mentally, he's kind of left his body. And that's not a good state for him to be in. So exposure is a process that can be used, but it has to be in very, very tiny increments. You have to assess every exposure according to the feedback that the dog gives you. And if you expose the dog and then wait until he gets over threshold, then that's a failed instance of exposure. You would not want to repeat that. You don't wait until you don't expose the dog until he gets so upset that he can't handle it anymore and then stop the exposure. That's not what exposure is. Exposure is maintaining the dog's emotional state under threshold. So what do you do when you think you've tried everything? So bottom line is you haven't tried everything. If you only tried the things that haven't worked. And if you've tried things that haven't worked, then don't keep trying those things. Don't keep, if something's not working, don't keep doing it. Do something else. There are lots of other ways that do have a history of success. And those methods, those ways have to do with working with the dog's nervous system by addressing his emotional needs, his social needs, helping him to integrate his emotions with the environment so that he can process all of this sensory feedback that he's getting from the environment without letting it feel threatening to him. And it depends if a dog feels, and I'm saying dog, but you could substitute the word person for a lot of the statements that I'm making. And I do on a lot of the other trainers who use methods similar to the methods that I use, make a lot of human comparisons. And the reason they do that is that our nervous system and the way we process the environment and process our social interactions is very similar to the way dogs do. So we can ask ourselves, how would I feel if this happened to me? And then let that help us experience more empathy for what the dogs are feeling. And if we can empathize with the dog, we can ask ourselves, what would I want someone to do to help me if I were in that situation? If I were scared, would I want someone to keep forcing me into that scary situation? Or would I want them to do something else to make me feel better? So, a lot of the questions, if you frame them in that context of how would I as a human feel if I were going through the same thing the dog is going through, it kind of gives us a much clearer answer and helps us figure out what the best thing is to do. So if none of the options have worked, then probably what you have tried are the things that ask the dog to function cognitively when his emotions are ruling his nervous system. And there's a disconnect there. He just can't. So if you're doing more training when a dog is upset, then you're asking him to learn when his learning brain is offline. And that's why those things haven't worked. You feel like you're out of options, but you're not. You need to work with someone who understands how to help dogs process emotions. And the way we do that is very much like, it has a parallel to the way we work with traumatized people. So one of the therapies is movement, breath work, because the breath is connected to the vagus nerve, which is connected to our thinking, learning, emotional, problem-solving brain. So the vagus nerve tells us what part of our brain we need to use. I'm oversimplifying this. So if you're a professional in that field, please forgive me. So what we need to do is give dogs the ability to process. One of the therapies that's used for people is yoga and meditation, right? What is yoga? It's intentional movement. It's bringing the mind into the body. It's connecting mind and body. What is meditation? It's relaxing the brain and the body. It's again connecting mind and body. When the dog gets into a severely emotional, traumatized state, they tend to lose connection with their body. We do too. So the other day, I was talking to somebody on a Zoom call and I started to get really agitated. And because she's a very smart person, she said to me, okay, put your feet on the floor, take some deep breaths, close your eyes, through the whole thing. And so, okay, yeah, so I know what you're doing because we do the same thing with the dogs. But that's pretty much what you need to help your dog do. Now, we're not going to teach the dog. There is a system, there is someone who teaches dog yoga, but it's not what you think it is. It's something completely different. It's helping dogs use their bodies. It's more like proprioception, which if you do any kind of competitive sport, you know how important, or fitness with dogs, you know how important that is, that dogs are very aware of their bodies and how they're using them. So there are strategies and techniques that don't involve anything complicated that you can start doing with your dog. You can do some synchronized breathing with your dog. And as you do this slow, relaxed breathing, you're going to feel better, and your calm energy is going to radiate to your dog. And your dog is going to mirror that back to you, because our dogs are always co-regulating with us. So the more we can mirror calmness to them, the more they're going to mirror it back to us. But that, that takes practice. Easier said than done, right? Easier said than done. And sometimes we can't always do that alone. We need support, and we need help, and we need somebody to guide us step by step. We need accountability. And as I mentioned earlier, there are lots of us who do that. Part of my program, when I work with my clients, it's part of the programs of so many of the other people that if you listen to the summit interviews, you heard those amazing people talk about the work that they do. So all of them are very proficient at working with dogs who have experienced trauma and who are reactive. So you haven't used up all your options. You're not out of options. You have a lot. So, okay, guys, a little bit of time left. I know I said this is an hour. I'm willing to go 15 minutes extra, 15 minutes over an hour. And if that's longer than you feel that you can stay, I will not be offended if you log off, although I'd love to have you stay. I don't want to, I do respect your time. So I'm just going to go through the chat and just take the questions as I come to them. And I will certainly try to get to everybody's. And again, because this is, I want to cover as much as I can in a short amount of time, I'm not going to be able to give you really, really in-depth answers. But at the end, I am going to tell you about something coming up next week, which will give you an opportunity to get a little bit more information than maybe I can give you right now. Okay, so Kathy says, prior trauma, physical and emotional, resulting in reactivity when on leash. And Caesar, here's another dog. Best way to help him learn to love the environment. Okay, Kathy, your problem is something that I think a lot of people can relate to. And if the dog's leash reactivity is due to a prior trauma, physical trauma and emotional trauma, then we need to back up and help the dog process that trauma first before we can work, because the leash reactivity is the dog saying, I'm worried about this other thing, whatever the thing is that happened. I'm thinking about that. I'm remembering that. I'm experiencing that. Help, help, help. This looks like the same thing. So you need to go back to the beginning. And that's, you're going to need help with that. You need to find someone to help you with that. And as I mentioned, there is help. So I don't want anybody to feel that your situation is hopeless, because it is not. There is a lot that you can do. Okay, Dawn, how to address people who don't understand their dog and keep them from advancing. Yeah, I answered that in the beginning. And I'll just, in case you got here late and didn't hear me say that, that is one of my biggest pet peeves. I hate that. And I have no sympathy for people who do that. So if the person says, can I pet your dog? They don't all do that. But if they say that, your answer is, wait a minute, let me ask the dog. then you look at your dog and you say, no, the dog says no, sorry, and then move on. That's important. Keep walking. Don't, and try to avoid eye contact, because eye contact is an invitation to engage in a conversation. If they don't ask permission and just start advancing toward your dog, what I do is I just put myself between the dog and the person. I just step in front of the dog. And to some of you, that might feel a little uncomfortable because it feels rude. But, you know, sometimes you have to do things so somebody will get the message. So I step in front of my dog, facing the person, and I said, whoop, wait a minute. Whoa, wait a minute. I said, well, we have to ask the dog first. And then I look at the dog again and I say, sorry, the dog says no. And then walk. Keep going. That's the ticket. So I hope that answered it. Okay, Deborah. In the heat of the moment, when you can't avoid a trigger on a walk, you know, people walk by, what exactly should we be doing to support our dog who is very reactive to anyone or anything that moves? Okay, number one, if you listen to Nikki French, if your dog's reactivity on leash is so widespread that almost anything is going to trigger that, then you need to stop walking your dog. And listen to Nikki's interview. The replay is this weekend. If you have the VIP pass, you can listen whenever you want. But go listen to Nikki's interview again. Stop walking your dog. There are lots of things that you can do instead. You need to prepare your dog before you go out on a leash. Now, if you're in the situation, you get in the situation, the number one thing you do is get out of that environment. Distance is your friend. Move away from whatever is triggering the dog. If he's barking at someone walking toward you on the street, turn around, go the other way, go, you know, and be conscious of your environment so that you always have those potential escape routes. And that's stressful. I know that's stressful. And that's why I'm saying, you know, you may want to just temporarily stop walking your dog until you get that situation under control. And again, there's help out there, guys. There's help. Okay. Thunderstorms. Okay. And in the States, we have fireworks coming up soon. I am going to do a special presentation the last week in June. I'll talk more about it this coming week, so you'll have time to prepare. I'm going to do a presentation the last week in June, and we're going to address noise sensitivity, because this time of year, it's a big thing, because we get thunderstorms. Unless you're in the Southern Hemisphere, then maybe not. But we get thunderstorms, you know, these late afternoon summer thunderstorms. We have fireworks going off. We have, you know, all kinds of noise that happens during the summer season that could be very stressful for dogs. So I'm going to address that the last week in June. So I'm not sure, a discrepancy with the talks. One speaker suggested leave dogs alone if they're on the bed, but another speaker suggested rewarding and praising the dog for being quiet on the bed. Yeah, you can do both. I don't see the discrepancy necessarily. And is this, I'm not sure if you're referring to a resource guarding situation. I'm not sure exactly how to respond to that, but you can do both. You can either leave the dog alone. If the dog is resource guarding, then that's a whole separate thing. So I know that wasn't a very clear answer, but I'm not exactly sure what you mean. Might be whether or not your dog has difficulty relaxing. If they are still learning how to relax on their own, yeah, rewarding the dog for relaxing. Yes, Brenda, that's a good answer. Thank you. That was good. I would, you know, this is just my personal opinion. So Sandra says to tell the person the dog has leash aggression. I would never share negative information about my dog with anyone. It's just like, you know, if you have a kid that is struggling with something, would you tell a stranger about what your child is struggling with? No, I don't think so. So I just wouldn't do that. I would just say what I said a minute ago, the dog doesn't want you to pet him now. Or I wouldn't make any excuses at all. If you have, if there's a real problem with leash reactivity, then you might want to go and review Nikki French's information and maybe put the walks on hold for a while until you can deal with whatever is triggering that leash reactivity. Because leash reactivity doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because of something else. It's like the last straw. So you need to go back to whatever the source of that anxiety is and work on that. I don't know if you can record it on your computer, Nancy. If you can, I guess that's okay. Sure. All right. Yeah, I would encourage everyone to learn about your dog's threshold. Yeah, that's a good point. If you want to help your dog overcome anxiety, the first thing you need to know is what your dog looks like when they're completely relaxed and calm. Not asleep, but just relaxed. Maybe just hanging out, you know, just relaxed and calm. What does a dog's body look like? Their head, their tail, their muscles. Yeah, training looks boring. Yeah, I agree. Aggressor is the wannabe. Aggressor is the wannabe pack leader, Nancy. You need to support. Yeah, generally that's true, that you do want to support the dog that is the leader, but you have to do it in the right way. You don't want to encourage unacceptable behavior. There has to be boundaries. So, okay. Let's see. By the way, if you guys want to share the chat, you know you can do that. There's 3 little dots, and when you hover over the 3 little dots at the very bottom of the chat, when you're looking at it, it says more, and if you click on that, I think it gives you an opportunity to save the chat. So if you want to do that and go back over these comments later, you can do that. Okay. Oh, somebody from Seymour. Hi. Let's see. Strays acquired 2 months apart. A male, after 2 months, they started fighting. Okay. So yeah, there were a number of questions about multiple dogs in the same household aggressing toward each other. Number 1, safety first. Find a way to keep them separated. Don't try to force an engagement or an interaction when you can see that it's not going to work. That would be the first step to prevent a problem. It's not the solution, but it's the first step to prevent. Safety first. You don't want the dogs to get hurt, and you don't want a person to get hurt, because that is easily happen. So Sherilyn, if you're in Seymour, you can give me a shout out, because I'm also in Seymour, and we can have a chat about that. Okay, I'm going to go down to the comments that are marked with questions, because I can find them. And then I'm going to go back over chat. Okay, okay, I see some ask questions, but they didn't put a Q in front of it. That's okay. Oh, which reminds me, on questionnaire, I have to say this while I think of it, otherwise I'll forget. On the questionnaire, the very last question was, if you want me to send you more information, give me your name and email. Some of you answered yes, but you didn't give me your name and email. So the questionnaire didn't pull your personal information because that was up to you to give it to me. That was, that didn't pull it. So if you said yes, and you remember that you didn't give me your name and email, then you can just reply to any one of my emails and give me your information if you want to. So just thought I would let you know that. So this is Andrea. I have rescued a bait dog. Oh, that's sad. That was used for dog fighting rings. He was worked through many issues. What is the best way to work with him on his dog aggression? Slowly, with lots of empathy, very gradually, and you have to not push him past what he's able to do. Work with him where he is at this moment. I know that's a general answer, but that's the kind of a thing that takes a lot of specialized step-by-step work, and there are lots of people that you can reach out to. And those of you, and I know this, for some of you it might be a budget issue, and I get that, I understand that, but you might want to think of it in terms of an investment in your peace of mind, and in your dog's well-being, and in your family's peace of mind. So just a thought. Okay, so here's a question. What should I do when my dog is barking up a storm and she is, okay, let me just, when my dog is barking up a storm and she's over threshold and nothing works? Well, when the dog is over threshold, nothing will work. The only thing will work is you get the dog away from that stimulus, whatever it is, if that's possible. Distance. That's the number one thing you want to do, is get distance. Do I let her bark it out? No. Or should I physically pull her away? I'd love it if you didn't have to pull the dog away, but if that's what you have to do until you can fix the problem at the root level, then that's what you need to do. I usually try to put the leash on her and lure her away. Luring with food is probably not the best way, because what could happen is that you'll create an association for the dog, in the dog's mind, between getting food and that bad thing. So food means that bad thing. So you probably don't want to use food as your
Really?
you probably don't want to use food as a lure. So I would get her out of that situation, whatever way you can, and then realize that that's just like an emergency. It's like pulling the emergency cord. It's not the solution to the overall big problem. That you would have to find the root cause of that dog's reaction. So let's see, Andy's got a long question. I have two dogs, 17 and 19 months old, palm skeets. Okay, they feed off each other. Okay, they're very close in age, so that makes sense. If either hears anything in the surrounding gardens, then they bark, the other joins in, and it just escalates. The only way to stop it is the tap on the window I do when food is available, or go toward the hose. I don't need to even touch it. On walks, the older one. So I guess you mean that you turn on the hose and they stop barking? So this happens when they're outdoors. Okay. All right, Andy, it sounds like there's a lot going on here, a lot. We could spend the whole time, talking. about this. Not that I would mind doing that. I would actually really like to do that. Yeah, there's a lot there's a lot of interaction going on between these two dogs that sounds to me as if it's not productive. That the two dogs need better tools to cope. And so I would encourage you to continue reaching out. This is it's a bigger problem than what we can address in a situation like this. But I would be happy to talk with you one-on-one about that. And let's see, Jerry, my Bichon can be very reactive toward other dogs on walks. Not fear, as he will take on mastiffs and even two German shepherds together. No pattern of sex, breed, age, size, he will attack some dogs. So yeah, it just because he does the same thing with bigger, scarier looking dogs doesn't mean that it isn't fear. So yeah, he won't listen when he's super aroused. This is a theme, isn't it, guys? It's going through all of this, that when the dogs are super over aroused, they don't listen, and they don't, because they can't. You can't get through to them because it's like talking into the phone when the person you're talking to is already hung up. Your message isn't going to get through. So okay, so yes, so what can I do? Address, first of all, whenever we have this kind of a situation, number one, avoid putting the dog into the situations that are going to create this over emotional response. That's a general statement across the board. What it means for you specifically is going to be different for each individual person, each individual situation. But you can't keep putting the dogs into these over arousing situations, whether it's leash reactivity, reactivity to other dogs, challenges between two dogs in the same family. If you continue to allow those situations to take place, then you're going to get the same result. And once that event is ongoing, once the dog is already over a threshold, the dog is already reacting, once that has happened, it's too late to fix it. It's like, I remember my mother used to have this saying, goes back years ago. And she used to say, you close the barn door after the horse already escaped. A lot of good that did you. So that's basically, if you're trying to fix the problem after it's already ongoing, it's too late. You need to fix it before it happens. You need to address the reason that underlies that. And it's an emotional reason. If you change the emotion, the behavior changes. That's why training or counter conditioning or luring or, whatever, that's why those things often are counterproductive in situations like this. Because we're addressing behavior and not dealing with the emotion that's causing it. So it's like if somebody is bleeding and you put a Band-Aid on it and they keep on bleeding, you haven't really dealt with the cause, the source. So, okay. Don. Don, you mentioned a hand taser. I don't know. I hope you don't intend to use that on dogs. Okay. Oh, please keep back, dog in training. You could, yeah, that's another thing I used to say when I used to do public access work with service dogs in training. I used to tell people the dog is working and just keep walking. So you could say that. You could say the dog is working or the dog is training or something like that, and then just keep on going. Yeah, that's a good answer.
Is there any audio?
I'm sorry?
Is there audio a little bit? I had my mic off, but this is Don, but I was only talking to somebody as if they were getting attacked, them and their dog was getting attacked by another dog that was loose. That's what I was referring to for
Oh,
somebody.
okay.
People are afraid to go out, and especially if they have a little dog, there's like, being attacked is like one of the most horrible things that can happen.
Sure.
And then not having any recourse at all, zero, makes it even worse. So I carry one of the hand ones. I've never needed it for anything, but for people, afraid of getting hurt and injured, if it's legal wherever you are, that's was where that comment went.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that.
Sure.
I know that's scary. It's a scary thought to think if you have a little dog and you're worried about being attacked by a loose dog. Yeah, I agree. It's one of the worst things. Okay. Oh, Lilith, yeah, I love this idea of giving it a year. Yeah, absolutely. It seems like forever because we're so used to the idea of, I'm going to take my dog to this class at 6 weeks, and at the end of 6 weeks, my dog's going to be perfectly trained. And that hardly ever happens. And when I was working, I used to do a lot of competitive work with my dogs. I mean, we stayed in training classes for years and years. We just kept on going because learning is a lifelong thing for the dogs as well as for us. So Lilith, thank you so much for your comment. And I'm going to come back and look at it again. Yeah, and there are so many. You can go ahead and read Lilith's comments in the chat. There are so many resources out there, guys. You don't have to depend on just the stuff you Google dog obedience and you come up with people who use shock collars. And for a reactive dog, that's just the wrong approach. So there's so much out there, so much available. Okay. I take my dog to a rover sitter to watch my dog while I'm at work, and sometimes I have to introduce him to new sitters, and they often have dogs. Roscoe is fearful of new dogs and is leash reactive. What's the best way to introduce him? A parallel walk is too stressful for him. I know he prefers hanging out with sitters that have dogs that he likes. You know what? Dogs are like us in the sense that, we connect with some people right away. You meet a person and you feel friendly toward that person right away, and you meet somebody else and you go, oh, that's not somebody I'd like to spend much time with. And so dogs are the same way. And if there's a conflict, you can let him sniff, but if the two dogs don't get along, then having them in close contact and just putting them there where they're going to be stressed, and one dog is going to feel defensive toward the other dog, or there's going to be that stress between them, it's just not a healthy thing for either dog. You need to take time to let them decide if they want to get to know each other. The best way to do it is without leashes in a safe enclosed area where they can decide if they want to get along. However, if there's a risk that the dogs will fight, that is a bad idea. You need a professional looking at the dogs with eyes on the situation to assess it and let you know what your best next step is. If you can take him to sitters that have dogs that he likes, then I would just keep doing that and avoid the ones with the dogs that he don't. Maybe you don't always have that much choice, but if that's a possibility, that's what I would do. Sometimes dogs will bark for a few minutes when somebody in the family, Carrie says, when my husband leaves, my dog barks, but I guess you mean, but afterwards the dog just lays down normally. Yeah, sometimes they'll bark for a few minutes when somebody leaves, like, just to react to the fact that somebody in the family has left. But if they recover quickly and relax and they're fine for the rest of the time, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. Okay, Sandra. Sandra, I see your email. I'm going to make sure I save the chat, and I will try to get back to you. If I get sidetracked, then send me an email too, but I will definitely keep track of it. Thanks, Sandra. Okay. And Debbie, distance is great when you have the environment, and my reactive spaniel is getting so much better in that situation, but to get to the space, there are narrow footpaths that sometimes the unleashed dogs suddenly appear, and Humphrey will kick off lunging and barking. Yeah, I know it depends on the environment. That is true. And sometimes you're kind of stuck because you're very limited for where you can go. If there's a chance that you can be choosy about where you are and just be aware of what your escape routes are, if you can step off the path, or one of the things that I've done, if I need to have my dog in a situation where there are lots of dogs and I can tell that he's a little nervous, I taught him to sit between my legs. I mean, it seems like such an ordinary thing, but it's like I'm making this little safe bubble for him. So if your dog isn't too big, I know for some people, if they're just short and the dog is huge, that's not going to work. But you can, maybe in that case, you could have the dog lean on you. But I just kind of step over him and I have him right between my legs, and I kind of hover over him with my hands. I scratch his ears. He's looking in the same direction I'm looking, so he can see everything around him. He's looking at everything, but he feels safe in that little bubble that I made for him. So that's a practice that I know a lot of people use, and it is really, really helpful. Okay, so Debbie, yeah, talking to him doesn't seem to help. The talking part has to be, you have to get him accustomed to what you're doing when you're talking to him when he's calm. If you wait until he's excited and you start talking to him, if you're a normal human being like the rest of us, you're going to be a little excited too, and it's going to come through in your voice. We try, but we can't help it. If the dog is excited, we're going to go, oh my goodness, my dog's excited. It's going to come through in your voice. So you need to practice it when you're feeling calm, so that you can take that habit and transfer it. You have to practice it, and practice it and practice it again and again and again, so that it works for you. Okay. So Nancy's question is, Nancy, I think what you're asking is, if you only practice when the dog is calm, how does it help when the dog is overexcited? Because you're teaching the dog a new habit. You're teaching him a new skill. You're giving him a tool. And once he gets very skilled with that tool, he doesn't have to think about it that much. He can use it more easily. Sometimes I compare it to driving a route that you're familiar with, that you drive every day, like home to work, work to home. You go the same route every day. You don't have to think about it. You can get distracted. You can be thinking about other things, and you're just going to automatically do it. But if you're driving in a brand new place, you've never been before, you're not sure where you're going, you don't know where the next turn is, you're going to be a little like on edge, a little nervous, a little excited. If you miss a turn, you're going to get maybe a little, oh, I missed the turn, and so forth. So you're going to be a little nervous. So it's the difference between having a tool that you're comfortable with and then using it when the situation calls for you to use it, and then being in a stressful situation and not knowing what to do. Okay, Don, thank you. Don says he loves all the dog stuff. Good. I love it too. Okay. And Joanne asks about, I know we're getting to the hour and 15 minutes point. I'm gonna go through and just quickly touch on all the questions. I totally understand if you need to leave. I'm going to send the recording, and I do want to say this one last thing that I promised I would tell you before some of you jump off. And that is, here, hang on just 1 second. And that is that next week, I'm going to send out information about that noise sensitivity thing that I'm going to do towards the end of the month. And I'm also going to give opportunities to anyone who feels the need or feels that you would benefit having a one-to-one, about half an hour, 30 minutes, give or take, talk with me if you want to discuss the possibility of me helping you. We can talk about what's going on. We'll discuss it. I'll tell you, I'll give you my best response. And if I feel that there's something I can do for you, I'll explain what it is. And then it's going to be up to you to follow up on it. But in either case, we'll have a conversation. Hopefully I'll be able to offer you something useful. And then I'll explain, what my programs are, and you can decide if it's something that would fit into your lifestyle. So, okay. Anybody who has to leave, thank you so much for attending. Stick around if you want to. I'm going to ask a few more. I'm going to answer a few more questions. Joanne says about food luring. Okay. Creating a negative association with a trigger. Does this apply only when the dog is over threshold? I've been told many behavior trainers to toss food in front of the dog if the dog is calmly looking at the trigger. This seems to have worked to change the CER. Yeah, pretty much, Joanne. Pretty much that. Yeah. And there are so many fine tuning points to that. Basically, food is not your all-purpose reinforcer. It's not always the right reinforcer. It is a very useful and very valuable one, and we certainly shouldn't stop using it, but we have to be aware of the overall impact. Okay. Sherilyn, yes, I'll wait to hear from you. Exciting. Okay. Brenda says recovery takes as long as it takes. Yep. And we control some elements like consistency, training, methodology, but your dogs and their feelings take the lead in recovering. 100%. Couldn't have said it better. Okay. Yeah, people are always changing. The dog is always changing. Okay, yes, Lilith, sorry. I didn't mean to lose you. Lilith says, I wanted to clarify that even though I worked with my trainer for 3 months and then continued the work on my own, I think that the ongoing 1-year training is so much more efficient and supportive, which is so key, as both dog and caregiver need to change neural pathways over time, as Brenda so beautifully expressed. Absolutely. Yes, Lilith, 100%. And that is why we have to take the time, and it takes how long it takes, because that is exactly what we are doing. We are changing neural pathways in the brain, and that's what happens in trauma recovery. We change the neural pathways, we create new ones. And it's important to remember that the old ones don't go away. We just create new ones so that the dog has a choice. Should I go to that old one that felt really crappy, or should I go to this new one that feels really good? And dogs, and a lot of times dogs are smarter than people because they always choose the thing that feels good. So yeah, we can count on our dogs to do that. Okay, yeah, Bonnie, thank you for that. Yeah, I've heard that. That's excellent. I've been taught to train for the situation, not in the situation. Perfect. Beautiful. I love it. Okay, and I have a couple of other emails. Okay, Brenda says, by the way, barking and growling aren't necessarily bad. Right. Right. Respect the growl. Pay attention to it. It's information. And never punish a growl. Done a lot of training and educating and want to share as much as I can because I feel really close to folks dealing with anxiety and reactivity with their beloved animals. I get you, and I wanted to send out some love and support. This stuff is hard. Brenda, thank you so much. Because you know what? That kind of empathy and compassion is really at the core of what we do. And we have to have empathy for the human member of the team as well. And that's why I always say, if any trainer you're working with makes you feel bad, then go away. Just turn around and walk away, because your trainer needs to show compassion for you as well as for your dog, because it's hard. Brenda, I totally agree. It is hard. Every time your dog gets to practice reacting to a trigger, it is building neural pathways that strengthen the behavior. Yes, I would encourage everyone to develop strong management systems and avoid putting your dog in situations that allow them to practice having to react to a trigger. Think of this as a pathway on a nature walk that gets walked over and over. Again, training is like forging a new pathway. You will have better success with your training if you avoid triggers and focus on training of those triggers while your dog is under threshold. Yes, this sometimes means your life looks a bit different, such as no more neighborhood walks for a while. It's not forever. Just remember that, because changing your life is hard. Yes, make some changes to make your dog's life easier. Brenda, couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much for that. Yes, Lilith, I agree. Yes, Brenda, you're getting lots of love from people. Well deserved. Thank you. To every time, yes, distance. Ask someone with a stable dog to stand in a corner. You approach and maybe your dog can just barely notice, and that is your starting point. Notice when your dog reacts. You don't want to wait for a reaction, because when the dog starts to react, they're over threshold. You want to work with the dog under threshold. That's the foundation for most of the approaches, BAT, CAT, and I won't go into what all those acronyms mean, but that's it. You want to keep the dog under threshold, work with them when they're calm. Yeah, Brenda's is suggesting some reading. Suzanne Clothier. Yeah, Suzanne is awesome. Bones Would Rain from the Sky. Great book. Yeah, she has a lot of compassion, a lot of understanding for dogs, and she gives fabulous advice. I highly recommend that book also. Yes, thank you, Debbie, for that message. And Lilith, to satisfy my dog's very important desire to walk, won't go to the bathroom except on walks. Plus, he really enjoys the walking, yet keep our chance of exposure very low. I walk a small circle in our neighborhood multiple times, with time in between each round in our yard, doing food scatter searches. Yeah, that's one of the things that we do a lot in our program, food scatter searches when that, it's exactly what it sounds like. You just let the dog find food that you scattered on the ground. It's calming and it's fulfilling and it's fun. Yes. And, I don't know if all of you are, there are things called sniff spots. And you can Google that and find it. And there's more and more of them. I'm constantly getting emails. There's a new sniff spot in your area. So you can Google that and you can literally rent somebody's backyard. And you have the space all to yourself. Sometimes it's like huge. It's a huge area. Sometimes they're fenced, sometimes they're not. And you can find out about those and you can go there and it's reserved just for you. So there won't be any other dogs there. That might be worth looking into for a lot of you. Let's see. Your dog chooses the reinforcer. Yes, we do let the dogs, that's part of the trauma recovery for dogs, giving them agency, giving them lots and lots of choices about things that we're so used to making choices for our dogs and we don't need to, that we can let the dogs make choices. So a lot of times if I have 2 treats, I'll say to my dogs, which one do you want? And they'll look and then they'll lean toward one. I say, okay, you can have that one. And if they can't decide, I'll say, do you want both? And then I'll give them both. So yeah, it's fun. So yeah, not using food. There are lots of things that we can do not using food. Lots of things. And we have lots of recovery strategies, and they mirror the things that are done for human to help them focus, get into their bodies, feel their bodies, breathe deeply, give them activities that help them solve problems, think things through, and so forth. And yeah, there are lots and lots of things that don't have to involve food. They can, but they don't have to. Yeah, sniff spot is sniff spot is awesome. Yeah. Yes, and the listing indicates the potential exposure to other dogs. Yeah, give the dog both. Yeah, right. Yeah, if they want both, he can have both. I don't have to be stingy with my treats. Okay, guys, listen, we went a little longer than I planned. A lot of you stuck around. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I would love to have personal conversations with any of you that feel that there's something that we can, that we could have a productive conversation. If you feel like you want to do that, I would love to, and I do invite you, and I would love to talk to you. I will send you after the replay this weekend, I'll send you that information because I don't want to overwhelm you with a lot of stuff. Look for an email. It's going to go out automatically Saturday at midnight. So in just a few hours from now, it's going to go out. So midnight Saturday morning. So you'll have 48 hours from Saturday morning to Monday morning, 11:59 on Sunday. So, and that's Eastern time. It'll be different, whatever time zone you're in. If you're in Europe, if you're on the West Coast, it's going to be different for all of you. Doesn't matter. You get a full 48 hours. Part of that time, you're going to be asleep. That's true for everybody. So anyway, 48 hours, enjoy it, binge watch, have a great time with it. And after the replay is over, I will reach out to everybody with an email. I will tell you how you can schedule a time to have about a 30-minute chat with me. And I'll tell you, what the format of that is. And if it's something you want to do, great. I'd love to talk to you. Okay, guys. Yeah. And if there's anything else that you need help with, I'm gonna go through the chat. If there's anything that I have missed, I'll try to reach out to you and answer you. And thank you so much for attending. I hope this has been helpful. I know that it was, very broad in scope, but that was the intention. I knew that I couldn't go into detail, but some of you chimed in with such wonderful advice. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. That was so helpful. And that's it, guys. So long, and thanks again. I will send you the recording as soon as it processes.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Marilyn. Bye.
Well,